Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tim Tom podcast. Today it is just me, and I thought, what better to do with the winter fastly approaching us than to cover some of the albums that have come out over many months, admittedly, um, that I enjoyed or thought that you might care for an opinion on, and that is exactly what we're going to do. And I thought, where better to start than probably with the best of the lot? Lianne Havas' self-titled album. This was an amazing album. The vocals throughout from Lianne, consistently brilliant. Front to back production from herself as well, which only made the undertaking for me even more impressive. Great singles with Paper Thin, Can't Fight, and even Weird Fish, as well as Bittersweet, which was a great opener for the album. As well as Read My Mind and Seven Times, other songs that I really liked. And also the closer Sour Flower, which I thought Bittersweet and Sour Flower together really bookended the album really well. I just thoroughly enjoyed this project. I thought there was an awful lot to get out of it. The runtime wasn't too long. And yes, I would definitely, if you like sort of soul music, R&B music, or even just sort of chill, relaxing, put it on when you're not feeling so good music, I think that this album covers all of those bases. Onto an album that I was quite excited about, Disclosure's Energy. And to be fair, the start of the album was very exciting indeed, with songs like Watch Your Step with Khalees, Lavender with Channel 3, My High with Amine and Slow Tie, which was both really good, as well as Dua Male Male with Fatu Diawara. They were all brilliant house tracks, had some great energy to them, and it sort of kicked off the album with a real bang, a real house dance, popping as well in places, bang, like, Watch Your Step at a great groove. Lavender progressed really well into that sort of really quite funky outro in a way, and the My High is just an absolutely insane song. But then we had some more unfortunate, sort of just boring and weak tracks towards the middle, like the one with Mick Jenkins, or the title track in particular, which I found really grating and really annoying. All the whistles just sort of dug away really, and I didn't enjoy them at all. Um, and then the end of the album was also quite bizarre. You had Birthday with Kalani and Sid, which was an alright track, but was, I don't know, just it was like just a cool R&B song. It didn't really fit the way that the album was going. You wouldn't have known it was a Disclosure song without being told, I wouldn't have thought. And then you had also these weird sort of lo-fi hip-hop interludes, which again, given that they were so close to each other as well, just sort of made literally no sense. And then this sort of motivational piece in Reverie with Common didn't really close off the album very well at all. I thought that overall I still would say I enjoyed it. Like, the 11 tracks, most of them are good, but just weird, um, sort of meandering. That, again, the album structure was poor. Like, it started off so well, but then you had songs like Sin Power, which was okay, but again, it was really long. And like I said, the interludes were frankly pointless. And then that they sort of just shoved on the end of the album, that EP they dropped a few months prior, and then two remixes of the song Birthday, which I personally thought the MJ Cole remix sort of made it make a lot more sense on the album than it did otherwise, because it became a bit more of like a garage track, and I really liked it, but the original version didn't do nearly as much for me, as much as I enjoyed Sid's performance on the track, which was a bit of a shame really. But yeah, I still would recommend this album if you like Disclosure. There's a lot of highlights here nonetheless, but like I said, they're mostly at the front of the album. Okay, moving on. Next, Mac Homie, Max Hard Lemonade. This was a physical copy only release, so if you've not even heard that this had come out, I can't say I'm overly surprised, but I was someone that decided to pay over the odds to get their hands on it. And I have to say, I was very impressed with what I got. It's 9 tracks, straight killer, no filler. You got the sort of the features you'd expect, I'd say, in the God Fam and your old Droog on here, but also some I didn't expect. Navy Blue and yeah, and I thought his verse was pretty good on the Clout Dracula remix. Alongside a sort of the track's kicked off with Mac rapping in Haitian as he's done a few times before. But then your old Drew comes on the back end of the song, although I think he has a different name, but you could tell instantly from the voice it was him, rapping in Russian, which I thought was a very nice touch. The other feature on that song that wasn't Navy Blue, I can't even remember his name, but that was possibly the worst verse I've ever heard. But that aside, there's an awful lot of good stuff here. I thought the track with El Sweatshirt was very good. He also did some production on the sort of the interlude track, track 5. The Alchemist pops up on here as well. And yeah, there was an awful lot of highlights, I have to say. I thought the opener, SBTM, the sort of way that the album, like both the discs, because I got the vinyl records, so both the discs, sort of when you turn it over, had like a sort of an introductory like vocal snippet from somewhere. So the first one was sort of the start of an audiobook, but instead of where there was a cue for wind chimes, it had the classic Dump Guard watermark, which I thought was very good. I liked the opener a lot. I thought Marshmallow Test was good. Smoked Malden, probably the highlight for me though. Alchemist production and the Godfam went very hard on that one indeed. And Squeaky Hinge as well as the closer. There's some sort of good tracks. I thought that, to be fair, most of the highlights for me were the solo tracks. So I think again, Mac Homie proving to be one of the best voices, one of my favourite rappers that are sort of coming up. Even though he's been in the game a fair while at this point, still not massively known anymore. I think mainly due to stuff like this. You know, he's not got any albums on Apple Music at the moment because they've all been taken off, and you can only buy the physical copies, which I guess at some point in time will be true for everyone if the internet does crash or whatever. But nonetheless, he's always someone I like to look out for, and I think that this was a very good undertaking. I still prefer WAPCON George though. I thought that was a bit of a masterpiece in truth. Next up, Ariana Grande's Positions. Now I have to say, I was looking forward to this album. I thought, given how good Sweetener was and how good Thank You Next was, that Ariana was on a bit of an upward trajectory. But this album has sort of brought me back down to earth, and it sort of reminded me more of some of her earlier work that I couldn't really get into very much. Um, just everything about this album was a bit disappointing, if I'm being totally honest. Even okay, so I was actually quite a big fan of the title track, the only single from the album, but I could see why sort of people that loved her previous albums might be a little bit down on this. But I thought it could potentially have maybe been on Sweetener. I think it would have fitted on there. It would have worked. But for the most part, it's a very, I'm going to say, very horny album, and also a very substanceless album. It's all a lot of just trying to get the sort of the primal needs covered, and that's really it from this album, which is definitely a far cry from the sort of things she was discussing on her previous 2 albums, which did make them a lot more interesting, because this album really lacked a lot of the focus and the interesting song topics that made those last 2 albums so appealing to so many people. I thought that yeah, just so many songs like the song Shut Up, as well as 34 plus 35. Um, Before you think, oh, that she must think she's slick, she does say it at the end. You know, I want a 69, duh. But it's just a bit. it's all so on the nose. It's so obvious, and it's a bit tasteless as well, I have to say. The exceptions for me, at least, being Motive with Doja Cat, who I thought was the only good feature on the album. The Weekend was okay, but the song just felt a bit melodramatic to me, and the same with the Ty Dolla Sign track a bit later on. Not that either of them did a bad performance. It was just that it's almost an R&B gimmick at this point. You have the sort of Love on the Rocks, really emotional, building tension, and it just sort of doesn't really go anywhere. Like, will they, won't they? Do I even care? Not really. So I wasn't too into it or too bothered by that. So yeah, Doja Cat though, she did give a very good performance. Her raspy voice that she always brings um, really added something to the track that and as well fitted the song topic quite nicely. My Hair, I loved. I thought that the vocal lines, the sort of the this was one of the few songs that didn't really go too far with the intimacy. It was just sort of nice. It was there. It was very enjoyable, and as I said before, I enjoyed Positions quite a bit as well. Surprised to see Murder Beats and London on the Track having production credits on this album. I thought London on the Tracks one was actually Positions, and I thoroughly enjoyed that track. But I think that did sort of underline another one of the issues on this album, that the production definitely took a downturn from, say, Pharrell being all over Sweetener, or the big Swedish music hit makers that did a vast majority of Thank You Next. So I'm sure she had fun making this album, but I didn't have as much fun listening to it. Okay, after this, another album that I think's gone a bit under the radar. I haven't heard too many people speaking about how much they love this album. I know Gorillaz fans are very loyal, and the fact that I saw my sort of Twitter timeline blow up for about a week talking about Humans, which was quite a mediocre album if we're being totally honest, and compare it to this album is a massive improvement and a massive payoff for all the Gorillaz fans that have stuck with them through the past two releases, which weren't that great. I mean, for me, I just got intrigued with the first single, Momentary Bliss, because it had Slaves and Slow Tie on it, and I was just like, what the hell? That's an interesting collaboration, and from there, really, I was hooked into the Song Machine series, and that's really what this album is. It's not perhaps a connected piece. It's a bit of a greatest hits style thing, in that every song is a sort of a big single in its own right, in a similar way to what Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy was in a way, although that they did sort of come together to a grand narrative. Whereas I don't think this is the case, but I believe that sort of the Gorillaz uh, Mysteria is back a bit here, even from the kickoff. Strange Times with Robert Smith from The Cure. This album sort of set the scene perfectly. There was a bit of that social commentary. There was a bit of the brilliant production that Damon always brings on an album. There was even a little mention of the political unrest going on in Belarus. And although it's by far not the only place that stuff like this is happening, I thought it was very interesting that that came up. Robert Smith had a great chorus, and I just thought the whole song was a brilliant way to kick off the album. And it sort of the first few tracks really went into each other really well. I thought this track went into Valley of the Pagans with Beck. Again, it was another one with sort of crazy, almost larger than life instrumental, classic Gorillaz style. And I thought that Beck and 2D's delivery both really made the song, especially the sort of the funny vocal lines that they were doing at the end to sort of reference what is it, Silicon Valley. I thought was brilliant, to be fair, and I really enjoyed it. And then you got into The Last Chord, which is another sort of a trippy, weird synth track with great vocal lines again. It's just a good kickoff, and following that, Pac-Man, which does sort of break the theme a little bit, because this one was more of like a game style soundtrack. It did sound like it could have been sort of just going on while you're playing a puzzle game in the background, the instrumental. But I thought 2D again was brilliant, and the Schoolboy Q feature at the back end of the track is absolutely excellent. This was far better than anything he did in his last album. It was a brilliant single, and I loved it just as much in the album. I don't think obviously it wasn't added to by the way that the album came together, but I thought it sort of worked well again with songs like Aries, which was another good single, Momentary Bliss as well, and Désolé. They all sort of just made a really nice sort of build up and excitement towards this album, and the Pink Phantom was that for some people as well. Not for myself, I have to say. I didn't really get it at first, but sort of once listening to, the four brilliant tracks that preceded it, you then have this sort of really glossy and expensive sounding glamorous instrumental, and then just 2D Black and Elton John, of all people, surprisingly complement each other really well in this sort of Love Is Over track that was thoroughly brilliant. Actually, I did enjoy it a hell of a lot. As I said, Aries was a good funky track, and Désolé as well, which did surprise me a bit because it sort of managed to turn an acoustic guitar into like the sort of funky Afrobeat instrumental, but it really worked. And Fatoumata Diawara, who may have already been mentioned in the Désolé Malé Malé song on the Disclosure album, again a brilliant vocal performance from her. And I thought Kano was really good on Dead Butterflies as well, even though I didn't enjoy the song overall. It was good to see them back together again after they were on Plastic Beach. I believe they did a song together. And yeah, I get the feeling that it's a bit of a return to form for Gorillaz, this project. All the way through the album there were great songs. And even the sort of the bonus tracks, sort of the ones after Momentary Bliss, was still very good as well. I loved Opium with Earth Gang, MLS with JPEG Mafia and Chai, also the Moonchild Sinelli song with Love to an X, and How Far with Tony Allen and Skepta. Of course, that was another single that was another very good addition to the album in sort of the grand scheme of things, and I thought it had the perfect blend of just picking artists that you sort of knew from the jump would work in the Gorillaz sound, like Fatoumata Diawara, like Kano, and Earth Gang as well, and then sort of creating some weirder collaborations like the Black and Elton John song, or Chai and JPEG Mafia, but they all came together really well. There were very few duds on this album, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. I thought the the Songs Machine experience was a good one, and there is apparently already a second part in the works, so I for one am very excited for that, because this was, like I said before, a brilliant album. Burden of Proof, one of the many Griselda releases that have come out sort of during lockdown. They've also signed two people this year. It's been a busy year for the Griselda boys, as it always seems to be. But this album, for me, might be the best of the lot. I thought Benny the Butcher and Hit Boy complemented each other really well. It sort of was almost like a classic Bling era style for the most part on the production side, at least just big sounds. Sort of something that I think a Jay-Z or a Rick Ross would love to have written all these tracks. In fact, Rick Ross was on one of the songs. But Benny the Butcher, for me, sort of proved once again why he is very underrated in the game. I thought lyrically he was brilliant throughout. His performances were great, and there were so many good songs on here. The title track, Sly Green, One Way Flight with Freddie Gibbs being among those. And it being another Hit Boy fully produced album. He did an album with Nas a month or so prior to this release, and it's sort of been a big year for him. He kicked it off with that great song with Mick Jenkins on that EP. He features a hell of a lot in an album I'm going to talk about in a moment as well. But for me, this project was so consistent. I only mentioned a very few highlights, but those it does sort of just flow together really well, one track into the next. And it does sort of always remind you that while Westside Gunn and Conway have dropped 3 albums each this year, I believe, that this was still the best one, and this is the only thing he's really been involved with besides a few features. So for me, Benny keeping his head down and just making sure that the album was perfect before dropping it. I mean, I really appreciated it. I thought it was brilliant, to be fair. His best undertaking by far. Although Tana Talk 3 was very good as well. It was a bit long, whereas this one, again, at 40 odd minutes, just straight heat. Um, it was brilliant, even down to the sort of the Griselda posse cut that it seems that every single release they have has to have at least one of on the album. It was a bit different, it wasn't quite the explosive, braggadocious barfest that they usually were. There was a bit more thought behind it, and I appreciated that. The other big Griselda release, sort of, though we haven't talked about, that I was a fan of, was the Who Made the Sun Shine by Westside Gunn. Again, it had a good runtime to it, exactly 40 minutes. Um, a lot of features on this, though, I have to say, that did at times weigh it down a little bit. But I thought the first 6 tracks were amazing. The Sunshine intro, narrated by A.A. Rashad, over these brilliant, sort of almost classic Deringer Griselda pianos that were really heavy. It was brilliant. The Butcher and the Blade, another sort of classic trunk knocking posse cut. Ish Ishkabeebles with a Black Thought again. I mean, Westside Gunn did get bodied by Black Thought, as a lot of people do when they get him on a feature. I thought that was really good. As was the Liz Loves Luger track with Armani Caesar and Alchemist Production. I thought that Armani Caesar, she's not someone I'd heard much of prior to this album, but I thought she killed both her features. The really nice singing on this track, and on the closer 98 Sabres, she was rapping on that one over this banging Just Blaze beat, and it was and she embodied Lil Kim a bit for me. I thought she sounded a lot like Lil Kim, who I'm sure in many ways is an influence to her, and I thought that yeah, just that was a brilliant posse cut, and it was a bit of a sort of a different take on it, because usually it's like the Griselda pianos that I've sort of become accustomed to hearing from them, at least. But the way they all rode that track, I mean, it hit different, and it hit a lot heavier than it usually does. So I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the songs on here. I thought that the posse cut Frank Lucas, albeit there weren't that many sort of standout features. I thought that the instrumental choice, being so bizarre, made that track for me. Really, I can't even explain it. It's just sort of just a really strange instrumental to choose to have so many guys rapping over. As was the Good Night with Slick Rick. I thought that that might have been the highlight for me, to be honest. But yeah, overall, it was another good album, and it sort of readdressed the curve that was Fly God is an Awesome God 2, which was a real letdown, especially as the original version of that was so good. For Westside Gunn to sort of arrest the curve only a month or two after that had come out, was such a good album, albeit the artwork for this was terrible, and it was something me and Tom talked about a lot on Pray for Paris, about how good the artwork was for that album. This one was a drawing his child did with sort of bloodstains on it. It was just, for me, nothing. I mean, you never judge a book by its cover anyway. You don't want to just be like writing off an album or only listening to it because of the artwork. But nonetheless, enjoyable album. Now, an artwork that I liked a hell of a lot more was the 21 Savage and Metro Booming Savage Mode 2. It was a sort of a classic, no limit, sort of southern mixtape cover, and I think a lot of the album sort of embodied that, which is once I saw that that was the artwork, I was really hoping that was the sort of direction they were going to go down, and it definitely was. It was a very impressive undertaking, far better than the original tape, although the original tape did have some good songs on it. Nonetheless, this was a vast upgrade. Morgan Freeman's narration on a lot of the tracks added a lot for me as well, especially just sort of hearing his voice at the intro, because I saw that he was on the advert for it, but I did wonder if he was going to play any more of a part in that. And the fact that he did was very interesting indeed. Maybe he's a 21 Savage fan. You'd like to think so. This was there was a lot of plays on the sort of the dingy 3 6 Mafia style, sort of sinister raps, but I really enjoyed it. I thought Running was fantastic. Rich Shit with Young Thug, Slide In, Many Men, and even Said and Done, because I thought that the start of the album was really good with all the sort of the dingy, sinister rap trap um, stuff that 21 Savage does so well, and Metro Booming sort of soundtracks so well generally. All of those tracks were really good, and then there was sort of to the sort of middle back end, sort of got a bit more introspective, and I thought that didn't really suit him as much. But Said and Done sort of was the perfect blend. And the only other thing I really wanted to talk about from this album, because I just liked most of the songs, but I thought Mr. Right Now was a very good track, although Drake's creepy verse is starting to have me a bit concerned about him. I think it is a problem that we need to address, because honestly, this guy needs to just someone needs to tell him to stop talking about teenagers, because it's getting very weird indeed. But don't let that take away from the fact that 21 Savage and Metro Booming, we already knew this was a winning combination, and I think that has been proved once again on this album. Now, Big Sean broke a quite long hiatus, certainly by his standards, to give us Detroit 2. Now, this for me is his best album, I'd say probably ever, actually. I've not always been the largest Big Sean fan, which I guess is ironic, but this was a very good undertaking, and I was a bit put off at the start because it was just over an hour long, but then seeing that one of the tracks, the Friday Night Cypher, was over 9 minutes long, plus a couple of spoken interludes that were a minute and change each, sort of did make it make a little more sense. And to be fair, it didn't feel it. I thought that besides the really awkward track with Lil Wayne that had that Human Nature Michael Jackson sample that just did not work at all, this album was really good. The production was largely handled by Hit Boy. Yes, the guy that's on a massive winning streak at the moment. And every track here was worth a listen, I think. Even the cipher, the aforementioned cipher with the so many verses, it was a bit ridiculous, especially given right. So they were all from Detroit. That was the sort of the gimmick for the cipher. But the talent gap was, I mean, the chasm at times was a bit enormous between people like 42 Doug and Royce the 5'9", or even Sada Baby and Eminem. I thought they were both sort of poles apart in a way. Sada being the better performer, of course. But still, there were some very good tracks. I thought the opener was good. Lucky Me as well. Wolves with Post Malone. Deep Reverence with Nipsey Hussle, one of the best songs of the year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The Hit Boy instrumental was amazing. Nipsey's verse was great, and Big Sean getting a lot deeper than he usually does. I thought that was a great collaboration that I didn't see coming off with the fireworks that it actually did. Lithuania with Travis Scott. I sort of loved for what it was, which was like a sort of just a classic, sort of weird, trippy Travis Scott song, and then Big Sean's put himself in it for a verse and taken it for himself. But it was a good track. Harder Than My Demons as well was pretty good, and The Baddest, it did grow on me actually, that song, because those sort of crazy wild trumpets were quite off-putting at first. But once I sort of listened to what he was saying, I really enjoyed it actually, and I thought overall the album, in many ways, was that you sort of You see that it's a Big Sean album. You know he's not the deepest or most interesting rapper to listen to at times, and you get a bit worried when you see the amount of tracks that are here and the amount of features that are on every song as well. But for me, I thought it was a very good undertaking from Sean actually, and I do hope that this is a sign of things to come because he is still promising this um, the 7-track album produced by Kanye, like a lot of the other good music people dropped at. So if that comes, I mean that would be a very interesting listen, especially on the form that Sean showed on this album because it was for the most part very good and very consistent, and you can't say that about a lot of Big Sean projects, that's for sure. Limbo by Amine. Now this I think is the oldest one of the lists. This came out a long time ago now, but it is definitely worth a listen. I thought that it's a vast improvement on his debut and also on the 1.5 mixtape that I enjoyed a lot more than his debut. And I still think it's a one up even on that. Again, the runtime, sort of the sort of classic, just over 40 minutes that I like. And an album, it instantly makes me think, yep, I can put you on straight away. I don't have to clear my schedule to listen to this album because I'll end up being in a different day and it still won't have finished. But yeah, I thought that it started with probably the best opening of the year in Burden. I thought the instrumental was fantastic. Amine's funny lyrics and sort of just pop culture references which do pop in throughout the album were always welcome in my opinion. It just sort of gave a level of satire that you don't always get in rap that I think is quite unique to him, and I did enjoy that a hell of a lot, I have to say. Then there were some sort of more banger style tracks like Roots, Shimmy, Pressure in My Palms with Vince Staples and Slow Tie. Roots, sorry, had JID on there, and he gave a brilliant verse, as you tend to expect at this point, as did Vince Staples. As well as some great tracks like the single Compensating with Young Thug that I thought was sort of, it had this really weird instrumental that I really liked. I've forgotten his name, who produced it, but it doesn't matter. Um, the only blemishes on the album for me really came towards the sort of middle and back end, like the track with Summer Walker where he was singing with her, and I thought both of them were pretty out of tune and obviously not in a good way. Um, and also when he tried to rip off Kanye, like the closer was probably the biggest offender of that. It really sounded like a sort of second or third album Kanye track, and it. I mean, there was obviously a bit of influence. You can hear that in almost all of the songs he's done, and a little bit on some of his previous work as well. But for me, that was when it was sort of too close for comfort, too obvious, and yes, that for me was a big issue. I also wanted to highlight quickly the Chloe and Halle album. When me and Connor were rounding up a bunch of albums on the White before this, we forgot to mention that, but that is really worth a listen. The Ungodly Hour. Those two girls absolutely killed it with their R&B thing. You know, their voices are fantastic. And there's production from Disclosure on that album as well, so yeah, definitely worth a listen. I just wanted to throw in a couple of singles as well, some that sort of caught my eye in a good way, and were definitely worth checking out if you haven't already, but some of these are quite old, so you probably have. Scissors Comeback, Hit Different, I did thoroughly enjoy that, even if Ty Dolla Sign's chorus was a little bit repetitive. It was just good to hear her again, and I think there is something coming around the corner, although she said that when it came out, and that has been a little while at this point. Nonetheless, very good. Freddie Gibbs and Big Sean united. Now, they were on a double XL cover together, I want to say 2012, but it might have been earlier than that. But in any event, they were together on a double XL freshman cover, and they are now together for the first time in 2020. Hit Boy on the production for this song. It seemed to be just a banger with four things. The only issue for me really is that it doesn't even reach 2 minutes. They just go back to back in one verse. The hooks fire as well, but you don't really get any more than that, and it is a bit of a shame, I have to say. I also thoroughly enjoyed the Amir Vance Social Distance social distancing banger, Keep Your Distance. It didn't really have many references to coronavirus, but he did call himself the Black Tom Hanks again, so that sort of highlights for all Brockhampton fans that he is indeed back on form. And the sort of the biggest issue for his Emmanuel EP was that the production was a bit bland. That is certainly not the case on this song. And the final thing I wanted to highlight was the two singles that have come from Kali Uchis. I don't speak Spanish, so forgive me for these pronunciations. Mendo and La Luz. Both of them are fantastic. Cali kills it. Both of them are features, respectively, from Rico Nasty and Jay Cortez. Rico kills her verse. Cortez, however, to sort of bring down the track. But nonetheless, La Luz is a fantastic song with Cali's vocals are just so dreamy. It's unbelievable. It's like she vocally has leveled up a lot from the last album, and I really like the last album. Her last project, Isolation, and yes, that was brilliant. And this is certainly looking like it's going to be a similar story here again. Although the sort of lack of instrumental fireworks, which is what carried a lot of Isolation, is a little bit of a concern. But I'm not gonna say anything about that until I hear the full thing. And that has been it from me. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you've heard all these albums and liked them the same, if not more than I did. If there was anything I missed out, don't be afraid to tell me in the comments. And of course, make sure you're staying sane and listening to plenty of good tunes and just keeping positive. All the best from the Tim Tom podcast, and I'll see you next time, whenever that is. Bye.